Good morning or good evening, good afternoon, everybody. We had a few technical difficulties a few minutes ago, but we are here. We're live. I'm so excited to be welcoming Caroline Clark to talk with us today. So we have a new link here to this Facebook event. Hopefully you guys are all able to tune in and see this interview as we're going to talk today about this great new book. If you can see us, if you can hear us, please go ahead and leave a comment in the chat box. Let us know where you're listening from. And we're very excited to have you all here today. So I'm going to introduce us both. My name is Erica Austin. I'm joined today by Caroline Clark, the author of this fantastic book called Fear and Anxiety in Dogs. So we're going to have a little conversation about this book that I want to say is available on Dogwise. I wanted to make sure everybody knows this book is available on dogwise.com. However, this book has been so amazing and has garnered so much interest that Dogwise actually just sold out when we first released our newsletter. So if you're not subscribed to our weekly newsletter, we highly recommend that you sign up for our weekly newsletter, because that's when we say, hey, this new book is coming and it's going to sell out quickly because there's so much interest in this book. So it sold out. We got a new shipment in yesterday. So we're filling our back orders. We're sending out new orders. And then this book is going to be probably this exact copy, my copy, on the table at our upcoming conferences. Dogwise will be at the Aggression in Dogs conference in Chicago in just a few weeks, and the APDT conference in Northern Kentucky in a few weeks. And I know that this book is going to be a big seller at both of those conferences. So Caroline, thank you for joining us. Thanks everyone who's tuning in and bearing with us during our technical difficulties. We're going to jump right into this book, and we had an audience question. We had people who could send in questions ahead of time if they weren't available to join us live. So our audience question was, what made you decide to write on this topic, on fear and anxiety in dogs? What was the genesis of this book, and what was that project like?
Okay, well, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us. It's been lovely to be invited and to be in America this evening. So what it was really, I'm a clinical animal behaviourist. My background's in veterinary nursing. So throughout all my working life, I've sort of come across dogs that have got issues with fear and anxiety. And way back when I first started as a veterinary nurse, it was almost kind of the norm. You expected that the dog would be fearful at the vets and, you know, kind of just went with the flow. But fortunately, as time has moved on, we realise that we can actually help these dogs, and the veterinary profession are much more aware of that now. But sort of fast forwarding to, I qualified as a clinical animal behaviourist in 2006, and most of my caseload is helping dogs with lots of different issues. However, they're underpinned very much by fear and anxiety. So, you know, whatever, almost I would go as far as to say 90% of problematic behaviors that I am involved with, even though they're kind of clothed in something else, or people think that it's something else, it very, very, very often is underpinned as an underlying fear and anxiety. So it got me kind of thinking that it would be really nice to write a book that is accessible for everybody. Wanted to try and make it a book that would be interesting for pet professionals, but also for dog caregivers, you know, people who are struggling with their own dog, and that they just wanted something that they could find some quick sort of solutions and realize that they're not on their own. And so that's how it was kind of born, really. And yeah, I've really enjoyed you know, writing it. And yeah, that's kind of the genesis.
Well, and it reads really, I mean, first of all, it's a beautiful book. We always love, you know, when we've got a full color pictures in our book. But I think that, you know, chapter 1, you start and you say, what is fear? What is anxiety? What's the difference? What are the similarities? How can you recognize these things? And if you know very little about dog behavior, it's an incredibly approachable, easy to read book. If you are a professional, you're going to learn something reading this book. I love the way that it's organized. It's easy that you could pick it up and say, I want to learn about behavior modification. I'm a pet professional. Or it might be something where you say, I want to learn a little bit more about mental enrichment, or maybe just take kind of not a deep dive, but a introduction level to different therapies, including medications, or what is out there. How do you know? How do you even know what questions to ask?
Yeah.
And this book is such a great introduction to that. So I'm so glad that you chose to write it. I'm so glad that Dogwise is carrying it, because it's a wonderful addition to people's libraries. We've already got some questions rolling in from our audience, so I will go ahead and put those up on the screen so that you can read them. And then also, if anyone who's tuning in has questions for Caroline, please feel free to just type them in the comments and we will ask them as we go. So one of our first questions is, what are some fear and anxiety signals that are easily mistaken for expressions of more positive emotions like excitement or happiness? How do you tell them apart?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. One of the things that I'll say in the book is that, you know, you can't sort of look at one behavior or one aspect of emotion without kind of looking at the big picture. And often dogs will wag the tails when they're feeling uncomfortable, you know, when they're feeling awkward, when they're feeling fearful. They will often, you know, there's this kind of thing, oh, the dog's smiling at me, you know, there's sort of showing the teeth. And these are kind of all appeasing behaviors. So it can be really quite difficult. So it's a really brilliant question. Thank you. I think it's a matter of looking at the dog as a whole, not kind of taking anything in isolation so you can't assess things in a vacuum, as it were. And I think really it is a matter of doing a little bit of homework too, because you can't kind of learn canine body language without doing a little bit of homework. So it's not necessarily doing an awful lot, but yeah, and I hate to say it, but, you know, looking at the things in the book, kind of look at those isolated behaviors and help you tell the difference. So yes, it can be quite difficult, but I think what is the important message is that until you've got a little bit more knowledge behind you, don't assume, find out. I mean, there's some brilliant books just on sort of canine body language, and there's some fabulous things online, but I know you carry quite a lot of books on this.
We do, yeah. We have lots of books on canine body language. There's an entire section of our website dedicated just to that. We have a new book that we're carrying this year that also sold out very quickly, even though it was a more expensive book. It was a full color, like a Bible of book. It's called Dogs in Translation, and the authors are European and had done split-second photography analysis. And there's so much that can be learned from video and so much that can be learned from pictures, but they did a really amazing job combining, if you take a video and you're taking it second by second, or 3 pictures that happen within a second of each other, and how quickly things can change. And like you're saying, the context matters enormously.
It really does.
But canine body language is a huge thing that I think people definitely can read about and learn about. It comes with some experience. One of our most best-selling books at Dogwise that we published over 20 years ago is called On Talking Terms with Dogs. And it was written to about calming signals. So you were talking about the appeasement signals that dogs give off, and some people are familiar with them and some people haven't learned to recognize them yet. Dogwise also has streaming videos that are about dog body language. So lots of resources available. Be sure you're doing your own research to make sure it's a trusted source, because the internet is full of information, but not all of it is accurate. So we are biased, but would definitely recommend checking out some of the books and streaming videos or DVDs on body language. Dogwise website. And then I do want to actually bring up, we have one of the pages from your book that I've got here shows some of these signals of dogs that are expressing some signs of fear, anxiety, and stress. And I love these pictures. I really appreciate the arrows that show that the pupils are dilated, that the facial muscles are tightened, that the dog is panting, maybe that their ears are back, they might be cowering. The dog, this little brown dog that's got licking his lip and has dilated pupils. And you're talking in the book about how all of these things can build into a stress response. So even in this book, there's some great body language breakdowns for people to be able to look at as well.
I've been really lucky with you know, kind of putting out the shout out for photographs, and I've been overwhelmed with kind of people's generosity. The problem is when you're asking for photographs, obviously it's very difficult to capture a dog when it's kind of expressing these behaviors, and you don't want anybody to set them up, obviously, clearly. But you know, sometimes just observing your dog and once you know what you're looking for, it kind of screams out at you. I mean, on that sort of example that you gave there was kind of some of the more subtle behaviors, and obviously the dog on the screen on the left, the greyhound, that was in the middle of a firework display. That's the one, and he was really, that's Morris, and he was really, really frightened. So yeah, there's kind of the extreme, but then of course you've got the other photographs there just showing the sort of the sclera, the white of the eye, sometimes called whale eye, and of course, you know, that sort of licking baby, chomping. Then you can really see the furrowed brow on that photograph there of Bella. So yeah, I mean, I've been really looking, and one of the other things you mentioned with your other book that you've got up there at Dogwise is where you're sort of taking photographs. The author was taking photographs. I was really lucky there with one of my contributors, fantastic contributor called Amy Crossley, and she took some photographs of her dog that was reacting, and it was fabulous, because as she took it, it just showed how that escalation of sort of fear mounted. And of course, the end result is often what people will see is aggression. Oh, my dog's being aggressive, you know, and that can be the thing that people focus on. So it's really good that, you know, you've got sort of in your catalogue there, and I was able to kind of be lucky enough to get in my book that these things can change second by second, and we miss them in real time.
Yes. And like you said, it's interesting. I agree that once you see it, once you know what you're looking for, you can't unsee it. I feel that way a lot about calming signals in dogs. Sometimes I'll even just be watching TV and say, oh, there was a lip lick. Oh, there was a you know, and there will be a picture of a dog and they're doing this huge yawn, and people on social media are, oh, how cute, he's tired. And it's, oh no, there's someone too close, or hugging them around the neck, or a dog is approaching that's unfamiliar. And once you can see it and recognize that in that context there is something else going on, it's difficult, if not impossible, to unsee it, which is great, because I truly believe that the more people are aware of canine body language and these responses to stress, then the easier it's going to be for us as dog guardians to make our dogs' lives less stressful. Absolutely. So this is a great resource. And I know that Way of Life Dog Training said that Dogs in Translation is a great book, and it truly is. And the more it's worth looking out, obviously. Yeah, the better. Okay, we've got a question from Ruth, who asks, can dogs ever fully get over or recover from being fearful? Will they always have this trait, or can it ever be truly eradicated with the right guidance and training, of course?
Oh, well, that's a nice question. Thank you, Ruth. So fear is a normal response. And so we don't really want to kind of eradicate fear per se, but I do know what you're getting at. Some dogs, we can manage their behavior, we can help them. It's very difficult to change a dog's personality traits completely. And I think as certainly as a clinical animal behaviorist, one of the things that I always do is discuss with the caregiver the fact that, you know, we may be managing this behavior. Management, by the way, is treatment. When we're managing a behavior, we are actually treating it. Whether we can eradicate that from that, you know, from a particular individual who's very anxious, who is fearful because of, you know, the temperament, it can be difficult. But if we manage things, we manage the environment, we try and manage their internal environment, and sometimes that might be for really severe cases, that might be with the right medication, then we can definitely massively help. And when we're managing those kind of external environmental cues and the internal environment, then we are, to a degree, yes, we are changing behavior. Of course, we can modify behavior by some of the training that we do. We talk about that quite a lot in the book. But it is always worth remembering that fear is a natural response. It's quite normal for a dog to be fearful, provided the stimulus that's causing them the fear, you know, the fear isn't inappropriate, you know, that it the kind of the it would be abnormal if they weren't fearful. But yes, I do take the point, Ruth, what you're asking. There are times when we're not going to change that dog's personality, but we're going to manage that dog's sort of behaviours. And by managing it, then they're not going to kind of keep going habitually, sort of repeating those patterns of behaviour. And then we can reinforce those more appropriate patterns of behaviour. So kind of long-winded way of saying it, that sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. It just depends on the case. So I hope that answers your question.
I remember when I first started doing dog training, I see a lot of reactive cases. That's something that I've been specializing in for a couple of years because it's so prevalent. And one of the things I'm always telling dog guardians is your dog is, of course, we actually want dogs to be reactive. If you weren't reacting to your environment, you wouldn't be alive.
Exactly.
Our problem is our dog is being overreactive.
Yes.
They're having excessive response to a stimulus, and that is making their life more stressful. They're holding a lot more stress in their body than is necessary. It's making our lives more stressful because we're at the end of the leash saying, why is my dog doing this? It's just a trash can, or it's just another dog, or it's just a person wearing a hat or walking with a cane, or whatever it is that our dogs have this big response to. And as I know you tuned in last week to our discussion with Tim from Biology of Dogs, that he wrote this book. And one of the things he says is exactly what you said. Fear is a natural response, and we don't want to get rid of that.
Yeah.
It's keeping us alive. Biologically, it's imperative that we do have that response.
Absolutely.
The reaction time and what happens in between that startle or fear and how we respond to it is really what we want to be able to.
If it's affecting the dog's life and the welfare, then of course we want to kind of step in and help. So yeah, you know, we kind of, it's a bit of a balancing act. I mean, we've got in the UK, we've got sort of bonfire night coming up where we have a lot of fireworks and such like.
Yes.
And, you know, dogs will often naturally talk about it in the book, sort of go to their coping strategy. Some dogs want to be with the caregiver. Some dogs want to kind of go under the furniture and kind of hunker down. And one of the things that, you know, we perhaps in our lifetime, you know, I'll put my hand up when I was kind of, you know, a young woman with my first dog, you know, come out of there. You want to sit with me. It's going to be a lot better sitting with me. And the dog's like, no, actually, I'd much rather sit here, feel safer. So, you know, sometimes that kind of fear response and how they cope is actually helping them to keep it together. It's that when it's sort of disproportionate to the event and the life is kind of spent in that fearful bubble, then of course we want to kind of step in and do something and help them.
Yes.
And we can.
We've got a great comment here saying, I couldn't agree more with the statement that when we manage behavior, we change it. And we totally agree. It's interesting you mentioned the coping strategies. I think that is our natural reaction, is that I know what's best for you, dog, child, partner, whatever. Come do it this way because that's what would work for me. But being able to really respect our dog's choices and say, I'm here to support you through this stressful situation is so crucial. Something that we see sometimes on social media or there's discussion about is that if you're coddling your dog or holding your dog, picking them up, you're reinforcing that fear. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, fear is an emotion, so we can't really reinforce those kind of emotions. You know, we can't. It's a bit like, you know, saying, well, we're going to have a major eruption any moment. So, you know, but I don't want to reinforce your fear, so I'm not going to show you any comfort. Well, of course, you know, it would be impossible not to show fear in those kind of circumstances. So you can't really reinforce that behavior. And it used to be a little bit of a lot of behaviors kind of said it. I remember back in the days, you know, when we've got firework displays, don't ignore your dog, don't look at it, don't do anything with it. And you know, then kind of people questioned that and said, well, hang on a minute, you know, we need comfort. And some dogs do. Some dogs will come to the caregiver for that kind of comfort, and that's fine. I think it's the kind of level of comfort that we give, and we want to make sure that we respect what their kind of choices are. I always say that giving a dog choice gives it control. and giving them choice and control really is a massive help to a dog. It's well, to any animal, us included.
Yes, definitely.
Us included. Yeah.
Thank you for speaking on that. It does seem to be a bit controversial. It was a question that we had when I interviewed Christina Spalding, who wrote The Stress Factor in Dogs. And she said exactly what you said. You can't reinforce an emotion. You can only reinforce a behavior.
Yes.
And there's certainly things we can do to manage some behaviors like we were just talking about, but respecting the animal's coping strategies and supporting them through that. I know that if, like you said, even for all animals, including humans, if I was going through something really challenging and it was making me feel fearful or anxious, the last thing I would want would be for the other people in my life to say, oh, deal with it on your own. I'm not going to give you.
Yeah. Or restrain you so that you couldn't escape from the scary thing, so yeah.
And I think too that, as you were saying as well, that individual coping mechanism, giving them some agency, giving them some control, that helps so much. And being able to respect that is crucial. So I appreciate you speaking to that. We've got a few more questions rolling in, so I'm going to put them up on the screen and read them. If you've got a question for Caroline, please feel free to drop it in the comments. This one comes from Janet. I have a rescue who basically lived her life in a field with many other dogs. She has not lived with humans and has been with us since May. She has separation anxiety and we can't leave her alone. Have you found in general that having a second pet helps with the issue? We started desensitization but backed off since she is heartworm positive.
Okay, thank you, Janet. That's a good question because it really does depend. And separation anxiety, I write a little bit about it in the book to kind of try and touch on most kind of fear issues. It depends what is the driving force of sort of separation anxiety, and it's perhaps as well to kind of have a look at that. And there is a sort of section in the book that talks about some dogs. It's actually the frustration of not being able to get to the caregiver or to get to a resource that makes them feel less anxious. So having the sort of kind of background, the dog that you've currently have, it would make sense that perhaps it might feel better with other dogs. However, it's a big, you could get yourself into deep water if you got another dog and it didn't quite work out. So what I will sometimes say is you can actually try it with a friend's dog and just see how that goes, testing the water. But I think probably the first thing to do, and obviously I can't say specifically because I haven't met your dog and know the kind of the back history and the total backstory, but sometimes it's a matter of just being able to address the fear and anxiety and put some strategies in place to just help decompress, help that dog kind of find some breathing space, and maybe do some kind of investigative work as to what actually is driving the separation anxiety, whether it's being isolated per se, whether it's that the dog has become more attached to you, wants to get to you. So it is a little bit more complex, and I know you carry the sort of the Bible of the separation anxiety Bible with Dogwise, but it's not. There is a little bit more to it than just the fact that the dog is separated from me, therefore it's anxious. But it could well be that it being used to kind of living the life that it lived with other dogs, that it would feel happier. However, you could get into hot water if you got another dog and it didn't work out. And sometimes what can happen is that the other dog can learn the behavior from the dog that's fearful and anxious. So then you've got two dogs that have got separation anxiety. So it's a little bit of a minefield. And I would say the best thing to do is to really kind of do a little bit of homework on separation anxiety. And in the book, there's a whole section on behavior analysis. So it's kind of sharing secrets with people as to how I approach a case, what I'm looking for triggers, kind of observing what's going on. So I would definitely say to do a little bit of that first before you kind of think on those lines. But yeah, I would say test the water, perhaps borrow a friend's dog, see whether or not that kind of makes a difference. Having said that, might get on really well with one dog, and then you bring in another dog and it might not. So it's not an easy it's not an easy solution, I'm afraid. Yeah, hopefully that has helped a little bit. I mean, sometimes with dogs that have got separation issues, depending on how severe it is, it might even be a sort of veterinary matter. So that, you know, if you've got a dog that's above threshold all the time, you're not able to teach it very much. And I know I keep talking about medication, and I'm sort of not one of these that's got to kind of go straight for the medication. But we have a fabulous kind of professor called Daniel Mills. I'm sure you may have heard of him over in the States. And recently went to sort of see, I'm saying recently, not that long ago, see a talk. And he said at one time he used to use medication as a last resort, but actually we're starting to rethink on that with some dogs. It's a welfare issue not to start with that right at the beginning, obviously, depending on the case, kind of get that in quite quickly. So again, a bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope that kind of has helped.
Great answer. For anyone who's curious, the book that she was mentioning, The Bible on Separation Anxiety, was written by Malena DeMartini, and it is called Separation Anxiety Treatment and Protocols for the Next Generation. So it's available on Dogwise. It was published years ago, and there's a new version out that's available on our website. It's a great place to start, whether you have a dog with separation anxiety or you are a trainer who is starting to see cases like this. It's something that is very common, especially after the pandemic when we were all home and now we're all gone, and people who got pandemic puppies. And so highly recommend that. Malena DeMartini also has a school for certified, they're called CSAT, Certified Separation Anxiety Trainers. And there's an online directory. A lot of separation anxiety can actually be trained, not trained that, you can have some training protocol plans virtually. So many separation anxiety trainers actually will see clients all over the country, all over the world, because they don't actually have to come to your house to see what progress the dog is making or where the sticky points are. So highly encourage, if you have a dog with separation anxiety and you want to take a deep dive, the book on separation anxiety, and also looking at the certified separation anxiety trainers who can help with that as well. Great resources there. So
one of the things that I would kind of just put in there is that was it Janet? I think it was Janet said that her dog had lived in a field. It may be that there's so much thank you. It may be that, Janet, that your rescue dog, that having lived in a field, now is in a domestic environment, and all the sort of kind of stimulus that's going on there, or the stimuli that's going on there, is probably kind of raising, anxiety in itself. So, it's quite a big change probably from the life she things like her life, the life that she previously was used to. So there's probably a lot of underlying stress and anxiety. So without kind of cheesy, the book is probably really good for your dog, because I would imagine that although separation anxiety is kind of one of the fallouts, probably there's an awful lot of stress and anxiety because of the whole new way of life that she's having to kind of transition to really quickly.
Yes, that's wonderful. You also mentioned medication now being more of a first approach instead of a last resort. There are many veterinary behaviorists in this country and around the world that see cases like this and are able to prescribe medicine. They're kind of doggy psychiatrists. And there are some people who have an opposition to that or some resistance to medication and treating with medication. But especially when we think about, what you said of the animal might be in pain, and it's difficult, if not impossible, to learn when you're in pain.
Absolutely.
So I think that is something to keep in mind as well, is a trip to the vet is always what's recommended first, just to rule out any underlying causes that we might not have access to as trainers and guardians.
Yeah.
Nicola would like to know, can physical traits mask or distort signals of fear or anxiety?
Oh, thank you, Nicola. Can physical traits? Yes, absolutely. You're talking about kind of perhaps some of the different breeds that may mask problems. Yeah, absolutely. Because you know, you know, when you're talking about some of the signs of fear and signs of anxiety, we're talking about some of the facial expressions, we're talking about the tail, we're talking about kind of body language. So obviously with different breed types, then we might not have some of those features, or some of those features may be distorted. So absolutely, yes, they can. And the other thing that I do mention in the book is that different breeds, depending on what they've been bred for, will actually react quite differently. So, you know, we kind of will say, well, you know, it's a terrier, although, you know, the snappy little things of terriers, you know, I mean, obviously that's a kind of stereotypic thing that people might say. But terriers have been bred to be bold. So they, you know, we put them down a hole to get a, you know, get a rabbit or whatever, you know, they've been bred to hunt. So they have to be quite bold. So they might express their fear and anxiety a little bit more proactively than perhaps a dog that's just been bred, you know, for other purposes. A lap dog, for example, who's been bred, you know, to kind of just hang out and be a companion. So sometimes it's actually the expression of fear can look quite different depending on what that dog has been bred to do. So it doesn't necessarily mean that terrier is quite aggressive. It just means that the way that they display their aggression is probably a little bit more overt than perhaps some other breeds of dog. So yeah, definitely physical and genetic sort of through breeding has changed some of the way that dogs might express themselves. And I think we've got to be careful with that. People will often, you know, kind of label a dog aggressive when in actual fact it's fear. Aggression is just a bit, you know, it's just a description. It's not. I mean, obviously there's a behavioural component to it. They are behaving. However, it's, you know, the number of cases I get referred from vets that what's the problem? It's aggressive. Actually, that's just a you know, just one of the symptoms of a problem. It's not a diagnosis.
Yes. I think also as well, when we were looking a minute ago at this image with the dog on the right, the little brown dog with his furrowed brow, is he does have a furrowed brow. And some breeds, we have Shar-Peis and pugs and some bulldogs that have very wrinkly faces. So maybe a furrowed brow is the default state. And as you were saying that, you know, it depends, right? It always depends in dog training. And as we think about this, you should know your individual dog and know the breeds that you're working with and that you have. But that's a really great question, Nicola. Thank you for asking that. We've got another question. This is kind of a long one. This one's from Karen. I have two dogs that were not socialized much at all. They were 2 when I got them, 6 months apart. Since the pandemic, they've gotten worse. I've tried management, covered windows, noise machines, increased height of wall in dog run, medication, etc. They were put through classes when adopted, scent work and agility. They tried to do those, although they were anxious. They are now reacting to everything all day long. What can I do to noise reaction, dog reaction, and not on walks, though?
Okay. I would suggest if you've got a dog or dogs that are kind of reacting to so much, and I know you've said that you've tried medication, one of the things that I will often say, and it sounds as if I'm sort of this, you know, person that's always turning to medication. I'm not. However, if you've got a dog that is sort of at threshold, I talk about threshold and at threshold and sort of, you know, trigger stacking. I always feel it's like a pressure cooker. You know, if you've got a pressure cooker that's always ready to kind of let steam off, it's very hard to kind of keep the lid on it. So if your dog's if you feel that it's so difficult to keep the lid on things, I would say, as Erica mentioned, perhaps get some advice from a veterinary behaviourist who can talk you through medication. There are so many different medicants. One of the things that sometimes quite understandably is people say, well, I've tried medication, but you may have tried a medication that just doesn't suit your dog. And sometimes it's worth going back and seeing somebody who's got a really sort of good understanding of all the different kind of types of medication out there that might be better for your dogs. It sounds like you've got so much going on with them that it's almost like, where do I get in? How do we get in here? How do we start? And when you've got 2 weeks, even more difficult. I would say that a lot of the mental enrichment is a really good place to start, to try and divert that energy, those sort of reactions into something that's more canine friendly, something that appeals to your dogs. So, you know, some of the enrichment, and I know again you carry some books specifically on enrichment, mention it in the book as well. So there are some really great ideas in there. But yeah, I know you've got one, so that's brilliant.
I will say this book is a lot of people think that the Canine Enrichment for the Real World book, and I thought before I read it, is a whole bunch of here's how to stuff a Kong and make sure you get sniffy mats. That is not this book. This is the workbook. It's very thin. You can read it quickly. Something that is really fantastic about this book is that there's flowcharts in it. There's worksheets in it for you to actually fill out. And they talk about a lot in this book and in the Canine Enrichment for the Real World book, not just the workbook, but we're checking off what's your undesirable behaviors, what's driving it, is it a fear response, and then what categories are being affected. And they go through all 14 categories of enrichment, including safety and security, which are different. I didn't know that before reading this, but something that these authors talk about is a lot of times if you've got an undesirable behavior and you start to find out how you can meet your dog's needs, all 14 categories, the undesirable behaviors go away on their own. They really do a great job of walking you through, you know, is this needing met? Is this need being met? Is there room for growth? Are you doing great? Maybe if we just adjust a couple of things and we try some different strategies to meet those needs, then some of that fear and anxiety can go away. So this, I happen to just have it on my bookshelf, but this is a great, it's an easy read. It's very easy to get through. And as you're saying, being able to maybe redirect some of that anxious energy and some of that behavior that is undesirable by making sure that their needs are being met. And something else that you mentioned that is always good advice is talk to a professional. We can give you our advice here, but we haven't met you and your dog. We don't know your specific situation. And so getting a canine professional involved is really, really helpful. Wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I'm all for the kind of mental enrichment, kind of getting the dog. I mean, one of the brilliant things about that is that, I mean, and we know that the dog's nose is this incredible sense that we really you know, we don't use it. We don't tap into it as much as we should. So anything kind of normally that engages the dog's nose has got to be a winner. And, you know, there's a few strategies in the book, but one of the things that's so brilliant about when we can engage the brain is it releases these natural endorphins. And one of the things about medication, you know, that you know, the more potent medication that you get from the vets, what all that's doing really is enhancing these natural endorphins. So if we can try and give those a bit of a kickstart with something that's natural and naturally pleasing for the dog, then we're almost giving it a form of medication ourselves. That's so right. It definitely is something that I would advise. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. Is it Janet? Another Janet?
Yeah, that's correct. We do actually have a question about medication. Jamie wants to know, can you start an anxious dog in training while they're on anxiety medication and eventually phase out of the medication if the training is helping the anxiety symptoms? Of course, that would be a question for a veterinarian, but could you speak to your experience with that, Caroline?
Yeah, I definitely can. You can. One of the ideas about using something to help with anxiety is to actually give you a kind of a window of opportunity. So the dog is kind of a little bit more calm. It's not as much, you know, going over threshold, at threshold. It's just a little bit more receptive to learning. And I often say to people when I'm talking in sort of some of the seminars that I do, you know, if I said any moment now we're going to have an explosion, but I'm just going to teach you a simple maths equation, are you all listening? You're going to be, no, I'm not listening. I'm waiting for that explosion to go off. So it's a matter of just kind of getting that opportunity where the dog is much more open to being able to learn. So in actual fact, the absolute idea of medication is so that you can start behavior modification, and then you can, as the dog is learning and beginning to respond, so that you can then reduce the medication. And of course, with any medicaments that we use, we want to make sure that we reduce them slowly. We don't just stop them quickly, reduce them slowly, and we see what the effect is. Sometimes a dog might be on a lower dose for a little while and then eventually weaned off it altogether. But some medications are useful, you know, for longer term, not just short term. But yeah, absolutely, that is the idea of medication, to enable you to start to teach the dog, and that it's in a much better place to learn.
Wonderful. Thank you for that explanation. We've got another question for Liz. Is the book written for newbies or experienced folks?
Well, I would say it's for newbies and more experienced people, not terribly experienced. You know, it would be something, so I would definitely say it's for quite a wide audience. The remit I had from the publisher was, can you make this to fit as many people as possible, interested owners and somebody who's maybe starting out the journey in behaviour, behaviour counselling. And so I tried to kind of pitch it at that. And I've had, sort of veterinary nurses, veterinary surgeons, new dog owners, people with puppies. Somebody said, and it was, really kind of her to say it, that she said, the book is much more than just about fear and anxiety. I've used it for my new puppy, and it's just been a really good Bible for my puppy, which is really nice of her to say that. But I would say that Liz, it would be definitely for a wide audience. So yes, a newbie, I think, would definitely get something out of this, as would somebody a little bit more experienced. I don't know, Erica, you've read it, so you could probably be a little bit more objective.
Yes, I think that as someone who is a professional and has read a lot of dog training books and a lot of books on dog behavior, I learned new things. I loved, like I said, the images in it are wonderful. The information is great. It's a great reference book. And also, if you're brand new and you're not sure, you want kind of an overview of information and you want to know where to deep dive, I would say that it's a great book to be able to point you in the direction. I know that you mentioned both the BAT training, which is written by Grisha Stewart, and Leslie McDevitt's Pattern Games in her Control Unleashed books. And even though there's just a blurb about each of those and how they might be a good tool to have in your training toolbox, that gives you a direction of, now that you've read this, if you want to know more, go ahead and dive in this direction. If you want to know more about separation anxiety, here's how you can go that way. So I would say it is for both. And Ruth just tuned in and said, I am an experienced dog owner and a professional dog walker. I've learned so much. Not too much jargon, very easy to read.
Oh, thank you, Ruth.
Okay, and so I had a question. Also, we did have a question about what was the name of the book that I showed. It is Canine Enrichment for the Real World Workbook. It's purple. It's got a purple banding. The original book, which is a little bit thicker and does a bit of a deeper dive, has got a teal green on it. So if you're on the website, you want to make sure you're getting the workbook if you're looking for the one with the charts. So just wanted to make sure that whoever was interested in learning more about that, that's the name of that book. And I'll put it in the comments as well. We don't have a whole lot of time yet, but I have a question.
So quickly.
I know, it goes so fast when you're having fun. I wanted to ask you specifically, we have seen a lot on social media lately about different training methods. There's always been a divide in the dog training community about what's best and if it's effective, is effectiveness enough? If we know that maybe more correction-based or punishment-based training works, but those of us who adhere to a more force-free and positive reinforcement-focused training philosophy know that there can be a lot of fallout from using punishment-based training methods or correction-based training methods or things that dogs find to be stressful or aversive. And you mentioned that in the book. We shared a quote from your book on our Instagram page and on our Facebook this week, talking about that fallout that can happen. But I'd like to ask specifically, how does that relate to increasing or decreasing? Maybe we're decreasing a behavior that's undesirable, lunging and barking, but are we actually decreasing the emotion, the fear and the anxiety that's underlying those behaviors that people find undesirable?
We're definitely not. We're not making the dog feel any better. We're probably making the dog feel worse. And when you've got a dog that is suppressed, then there is more danger of a fallout. So one of the things to talk about in the book is this big fallout is something called learned helplessness. So people who it's not a fault on their part. They're seeing somebody using aversives. They're seeing that dog kind of being a lot sort of better, managed better. It's not exhibiting the behavior anymore. And actually that can be quite worrying, because that is either that dog is too frightened to probably express that behavior, but it's still feeling and probably feeling it more. But it's what we call learned helplessness, and it is a learning phenomena. It's mentioned it in the book. It's a kind of a part of our sort of theory of learning. We talk about that quite a lot. And it's when a dog is suppressed, they're not behaving as they would, but it's because they're almost what we call shut down. They're not expressing that behavior. They're still feeling the fear, but they're not able to express themselves in quite the same way. Now, that doesn't mean to say that pressure cooker isn't, that steam isn't rising. And unfortunately, because a dog is inhibited and they're not showing any outward signs, it can be a real surprise for people. They're not getting any warning signs. The dog's not warning them that they're feeling uncomfortable. It just becomes quite random, or that's what the owners will say. The thing is, it came out of nowhere. Well, it did come from somewhere, but it was just being suppressed. So it's so important that we use kind, positive reinforcement methods, that we don't use these aversives, because not only are we it's a welfare issue in itself, we are suppressing that dog from showing those fearful behaviors, and then we have absolutely no way of determining how that dog is feeling, and then that could cause a nasty injury, and then we all know what could happen as a result of that. So I'm always for looking for the positives, kind, sort of methods of training. For that reason, it's scientifically, there's a good reason for using those methods of those kind of rewarding behavior, to reward behaviors.
And we happen to know that those are very effective. As you said, I think that the sensationalized examples that we see a lot on social media is that the results seem very fast, that it seems you have a dog that goes from barking and lunging to calm, or at least not expressing those behaviors at that moment. And so the misunderstanding from people who maybe haven't studied canine body language as extensively as others, and they might be missing those signs we talked at the beginning of our interview of, once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't unsee the lip licking and the looking away and the whale eye and the yawning and the coward body posture or the tucked tail that might look like a calm dog. But as you said, that actually are indicators that the dog is shut down. And something that Tim said last week when we were talking about the biological evolution of dogs and how they function is that dogs cannot learn when they are at that heightened state of stress. It's something you mentioned a little while ago about medication, is that if they're always up here, we have to come down to this level so we can actually learn, and medication might bring you to that level, keeping the dog under threshold, which could be difficult in certain situations. So I think that the myth is that positive reinforcement training takes longer. You don't have immediate results, but I think that the outward expression of behavior is not indicative of those results if the underlying needs are not being met. So thank you for speaking to that. We are at the end of our time. I'm so grateful again, Carolyn, you've joined us. We didn't even get to share all of the pages from our book, but one thing I did want to mention is there is a lot of information in this book, including referencing how to make sure that your dog is not in pain, that we are approaching this picture on the left has someone who's reaching over the dog. And again, that body language is so subtle.
This is my dog. This is my dog. Me, so she knows me well. So it's really interesting to, she knows me, really well. And but it just shows that, that certain things that we do every day to put on the harness to do something with them, that actually I'm not really sure about that. I'm not keen. So it's quite interesting, even with your own dogs, to see these things, and you miss them sometimes. You're in a rush, you get the harness on, and so that's me with my dog. So it just shows you that your own dog can feel a little bit uncomfortable with things that you do, and as you say, once you recognize it, you never forget. I did that for the photograph, to illustrate what can happen. It just subtle things that we sometimes miss when we're in a bit of a rush to get our dogs ready. And if we've got a dog that is feeling quite anxious about going out of the home, then we're starting some of those minor kind of stressors before we even get out. So it's kind of to illustrate that that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Caroline's book, Fear and Anxiety in Dogs, is available at Dogwise. It looks like we have someone who just left a comment saying, thank you so much. We're waiting for our book to arrive at any moment.
Oh, thank you.
Go grab your copy. It's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. I also wanted to let you all know we mentioned several books today in our presentation, in our interview, and some people have asked about the different books. So Sandra, the book about pattern games is Leslie McDevitt's Control Unleashed. She has 3 books and she discusses her pattern games in each of those. Bat 2.0 was written by Grisha Stewart, also a great resource for dogs with reactivity. Caroline mentions both of those in her books. In her book, Fear and Anxiety in Dogs. Milena De Martini's book about separation anxiety is also available on our website. And we do have several resources about canine body language, including on talking terms with dogs, learning about calming signals. And we did have a quick question about how do you explain to kids to recognize fear signs. Those are great resources. We have books that are written for kids. There's a wonderful book that Lily Chin illustrated called Butt Pup. Has some good ones in there. So check out our resources on our website about canine body language if you're interested in learning more. We have books, DVDs, streaming video that will help to increase your knowledge and be able to help you see when dogs are feeling those fearful and stressful responses so that we can help them through that. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for the questions. It's nice to know that you're there.
And for the rest of you, we will see you all next time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.